It's fall, y'all, and I'm going to show you how to make a pumpkin block with a maple leaf center. So stick around and we're going to conquer that. Plus, I'm going to show you how to take 4 of those pumpkin blocks and make 4 different variations of layouts. Yeah, I'm packing that all in under 20 minutes. So let's get started. Hello, my friends. I'm Stacy of Stacy Creates Stuff, and today we are going to make a pumpkin patch quilt. So let's get right to it. Here are the pieces for a single pumpkin. I have my main pumpkin fabric, and then I have a lighter color for the maple leaf design that will be carved into the pumpkin. I have my background and a stem, and I'm going to put all these pieces together to make a pumpkin. Let's get started. There is a link to a free pattern download in the description and also in the first pinned comment. The first thing we're going to do is take our 2.5-inch squares and make half square triangles using 1 fabric of the maple leaf and 1 fabric of the pumpkin. I'm going to make 2 sets of those. At the same time, I'm also going to take one of my 2-inch maple leaf squares, and I am going to sew on the diagonal of the smaller pumpkin color. And I'm going to do that on opposite corners. This is going to make the stem of our maple leaf. So let's sew those, and I'll come back and I'll show you how it starts going together. And I trim the half square triangles down to 2-inch squares. Now with my pieces sewn, let's go ahead and lay out our pumpkin block. Now this design board is a little small, but we'll make it work. So our maple leaf has a stem at the bottom. The maple leaf itself is a 9 patch, and it is made up of solid maple leaf squares, 1 solid pumpkin fabric square. We use the half square triangles to finish out. So I will sew this together like I would any 9 patch in 3 rows. And then I will sew the rows together. Meanwhile, while I'm working on that, the edges of the pumpkin, or the sides of the pumpkin, are going to have some background taken out of the corners. So one side will go on this side of the maple leaf, and the other will go over here. And I'm going to use some of my 2-inch background squares, and I'm going to sew those on the diagonal in each of the outermost corners of the pumpkin. I'm using a batik for my background, so it won't matter which side I'm sewing on. But of course, if you're using a regular print, you'll want to make sure that you have right sides together. So I will sew on the diagonal of each of those, and then that will fold back, and that will have those pieces in place. Let's go sew those. I'm back with those pieces finished. So here we have our little maple leaf, which is a very cute block all on its own. And we have both sides of the pumpkin. So I'm just going to turn this one around. I did trim off the excess fabric there. So these will go on each side. Then these little strips will go at the top and the bottom with the 9 patch between them. So once these strips are sewn to the maple leaf, then I can go ahead and sew on the side pieces. Before I go ahead and sew this piece, I can determine whether I want the maple leaf to be pointing in this direction or that direction. And if I'm doing multiple pumpkins, like I am for this project, I can have some going in this direction and some going in that direction. Just kind of changes things up. But you can certainly have them going all in one direction if that's what floats your boat. Now, while I'm putting those parts of the pumpkin together, I'm also going to work on the stem. So I have extra pieces here because I'll be making more pumpkins. But you just need one green rectangle, and you will need a total of 2 of the background squares. And I'm going to go ahead and sew on the diagonal and fold that back. And then I will take another square to sew on the opposite, much like you would a flying geese. Of course, with flying geese, you would sew this way, so they end up like that. I don't want a triangular stem. I want one that goes like this. This diagonal is parallel to this diagonal. Now, that will make a stem that goes pointing upward toward the left. If you want a stem that goes the other way, then you would just sew on opposite diagonals. And I think for my pumpkin project, I'm going to have some stems that go towards the left and some that point upwards towards the right. The key, though, is to make sure that the 2 squares you're sewing have parallel diagonals. So I'm going to sew some of those while I'm putting this together. I have the main part of my pumpkin sewn together, and now I just need to put on the stem. I don't need any more 2.5 squares. Those are for other pumpkins. And I just need 1 of the 5-inch rectangles and 1 of the 3.5-inch rectangles. Now, which goes where? Well, that just depends on which direction your stem is facing. So if you want to line up your stem so it's in the center here, which means that I'll need a short piece there and the longer piece there. If your stem was going the other way, hard to see, because if I turn this around, it's still going the same direction. So I'm going to flip it over, and then you would have to move, kind of pretend the stem's going like that. We'll see that a little better. Then I would have to place these on this side. So it just depends on your stem, but you want to line up the green part with the center of the leaf. And then you will sew these 3 pieces together into a row. That row goes to your main part of your pumpkin, and you have 1 pumpkin block done. Let's go do that. Before I sew this little row on, I just wanted to show you that if you get it wrong by putting the wrong rectangle on each side, no worries, just flip it around. It is perfectly fine. So one side gets a 3.5 and one side gets the 5-inch. And then once you have them positioned correctly, then you can finish your block. And here we have our completed pumpkin block. So I'm going to make 3 more, and then I'm going to show you the different layouts that you can use them as a wall hanging or a table runner, maybe even individual placemats. So let's see what I come up with. It is time to lay out the pumpkin patch. So I have cut sashing and gathered up my little green 2-inch squares for the posts. And of course I have my 4 pumpkin blocks. So one way to lay them out is in a 2x2 configuration. So I'm going to go ahead and put my posts in. So this configuration uses 9 of the squares. I have a 10th, which will come in handy momentarily. And then I have 2 lengths of sashing. One is cut 11 inches and the other is cut 9.5 inches. And I'm just going to go ahead and place those on my design board. All right, I do have some extras. You'll see why in a moment. And then the same for the sides here. And again, I have a couple of extra for that. All right, so here we go. You would just sew your sashing row, sew a row of pumpkin blocks, sashing row, pumpkin blocks, sashing row, sew all your rows together, and voila, you would have a great little table topper or wall hanging. Works great. But what if you don't really have that kind of real estate for your wall, and perhaps you have a long, skinny, narrow area that would make a cute little banner. Then you can make a vertical quilt. Just going to move this down, move this one up, you're going to have to use your imagination because otherwise I need to get my step stool. This piece of sashing, of course, will go way up there. We'll just leave it off to the side. So in this configuration, I will need those extra pieces of 9.5-inch sashing and that 10th post to put down there. And remember, use your imagination. That's up at the top. And now I have a long vertical. So that would be adorable on a door, next to a door, on a narrow wall, somewhere where you have some long vertical space and maybe not the width to put the 2x2. And you would construct this in a similar way. You would do post sashing post. So those rows, so the rows with the sashing, pumpkin sashing, and then put your whole thing together. And of course you can lay it out in any configuration that you want. It would also make a great little table runner. You can have the pumpkins all going the same way, or you could have half the pumpkins facing the other direction. Imagine turning that one around as well. And that way it's kind of a see it from two different directions kind of table runner, but that's totally up to you. Now I did construct my blocks on a little side note here with some of the maple leaves going towards the right and some of them going towards the left, and the same with the stems. Some point toward the left, some point toward the right, and it doesn't necessarily match which direction the maple leaf is going. You can do whatever you want. They can all go the same direction. They can be all different like this. It's up to you. All right, this was configuration number 2. Configuration number 3, make it a horizontal quilt. So maybe you have a space above a mantle or a long horizontal space that would work better for going horizontal. And you could also make this into a bench pillow in that direction. So I'm going to go ahead and move this over. Now, if your bench or wall isn't long enough to have 4, you could certainly just do 3. And in this case, I will need those extra long sashing. This configuration, if you use 4 pumpkins, will use a total of 8 of the longer sashing and 5 of the shorter. The vertical was just the opposite. It used 8 short ones and 5 of the long ones. Let me hop out of the way so you can see the whole thing. All right, so I have one last possible configuration for you, and that is to make placemats. Now in this case you would need an additional strip, so that's a 5th strip for the sashing to make up extra pieces, because every block is going to have 2 short pieces and 2 long pieces. So just to pop this one up here, plus you will need additional posts as well. Here's what one placemat would look like. Here's another. And of course I'm missing 6 posts because I only have a total of 10, and I will need 16 if I'm going to make 4 individual placemats. Now these placemats will measure about 12 inches by 13.5, which is a little smaller than your standard placemat, but they're still adorable, and you could also make some pillows with them. The kit that is available from Vintage Pink and Green, my favorite quilt shop, will have enough fabric to make your 4 pumpkins, including enough fabric if you wanted to make the 4 placemats, and it does include backing and binding. The pattern, of course, it comes with the kit and includes instructions on how to configure any of those 4 different variations that I gave you. Which configuration am I going to choose? Here's what I did. I hope you enjoyed today's pumpkin quilt. Perfect for this time of year as we're just getting into fall, and you might need a little decoration. This one is great because it will last you through the entire fall season. And you can arrange your blocks in any of those configurations to make just the right quilt you need for your space. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial, and I will be back soon with even more. Until then, keep stitching. Bye.